Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of Unfollowing Mum. I have a guest with me today who I am delighted to speak to. I think that a lot of you may well have found her across social media. Her content is really empowering if you are a cycle breaker, something that I think so many of you will really relate to. I mean, I relate to it constantly, and I've seen it across all the different platforms. Her name is Triinu. Hello.
Hi, thank you so much for having me on. What a pleasure to be here.
Oh, thank you so much for coming on and having a chat with us. As I said, I love the content that you create all around being the cycle breaker, the trials and tribulations around it. But for listeners who are not familiar with you, can you just introduce us, let us know what you do and who you are?
Of course. So, like you said, my name is Triinu. I am a women's transformation coach, and my clients are anxious women who are people pleasers, who feel like they are not enough, but they're usually not sure why. So, they usually come to me and they have all of these kind of things that are bothering them, like I said, people pleasing, being anxious about things they know they should not be anxious about. Um, and I use modalities that help them to change their subconscious mind for them to then reconnect with themselves and love themselves and get that clarity on who they are and really, really get that empowerment as well as like who they are and what they want to do in this life.
I love that. I think that is absolutely wonderful. I completely understand what you mean about being a people pleaser and that struggle with self-love. I've actually just recently qualified myself as an empowerment coach and life coach. So yeah,
Well
it's
done.
thank you so much. It's new this week. So, when this podcast goes out, it might have been a little while since I've qualified, but I am so proud to be able to say that I can work with people basically doing what we're doing now, but on a slightly higher level of being able to get them to reconnect. So I really relate to what you say about that and that struggle, having had it myself with struggling with self-love. And I think when you are in a position to have experienced that and to have experienced how difficult it can be to love yourself, to meet yourself when you've had a difficult upbringing, I think you're really in a position to be able to help other people find that connection to them, because it is really difficult when we've had a difficult upbringing and we've struggled. And as you said just before we started recording, with being that cycle breaker,
Yeah.
can you talk to me a little bit about your experiences with that and how you help women connect with themselves?
Yeah, I think what you said about having had to like that you were a people pleaser and you can relate to my content. I'm just going to circle back to that a little bit.
Hmm.
A lot of the messages I get from women and my clients is like you are just like you just know what's going on in my head. Like, how do you do that? Like, and I'm like, because I was that,
Yeah.
because I've had that brain, because I've had those limiting beliefs. I've had those beliefs about myself. So it is so valuable to them when they get to sit with someone who is like, I know what's going on in your brain, and they feel so validated and they feel so reassured. So it I would say I would turn it around. This is a good thing, you and me both being people pleasers, because my clients absolutely love that, because I can read them very easily, and obviously that trust just goes from there. As far as being like a cycle breaker in my own family goes, I come from a family of very emotionally unavailable people. um, I grew up in a single parent household with my mother. My mother actually left me when I was 4 years old. She left me for 2 years. She like came, so obviously I'm not from the UK. I'm actually from Estonia, and she came to the UK for like 2 years. So I was 4 years old, very kind of attached to my mum, and then she left me with my grandmother. And then she came back, which obviously you would think things were fine. But I guess when I hit those more like teenage years and everything like that, I my attitude brought a lot of her own shadows, like to the surface, and we just didn't get along, and we kind of the relationship was really, really toxic. And when I grew up, I my passion and all my content, as you know, is mainly surrounded around, you know, being the adult child of emotionally unavailable parents. Because until when I was 30 years old, I didn't know what was wrong with me. I don't know. And I've been and done a lot of things, like, you know, have had very suicidal thoughts, you know, not wanting to be in this world, thinking I didn't deserve to be in this world, you know, feeling like an alien. I'm sure you can relate. You're
Oh,
just like, am
yeah.
I from another planet? You know.
Yeah.
And and when I kind of found that this is not a norm, like this is not the norm, because you obviously we all kind of think that what we are going through is normal because that's a way to survive, and realized where these beliefs kind of came from. I didn't You could argue that emotionally unavailable parents, like, there's no direct abuse there. You know, it doesn't matter that, you know, maybe there wasn't like hitting all the time or anything like that, but there was things like, you know, not talking to you for like days and stuff, but
Yeah.
there isn't anything like in black and white. So what happens to the grown-ups of emotion, you know, the grown-ups who had emotionally unavailable parents, is that it kind of further elongates that shame of, but nothing really bad happened, so why am I feeling like I don't want to be in this world anymore, that it is my fault. And that kind of further, that shame is just like like this cycle that keeps going on and on and on. And when I realized that, you know, this is what had happened, I like, puzzle pieces fell together. But that doesn't mean that just because I realized what was like wrong with me, that, you know, not wrong with me, but what I had experienced, that how it kind of changed my life, it didn't mean that I was suddenly like healed.
Yes.
Like,
Yeah.
I did go to therapy and I talked about it and everything like else, but I felt myself kind of back in that victim mode, very much kind of liking being a victim as well. I'm sure we can all relate a little bit, but kind of this kind of um like, nothing changed really. And I didn't kind of know. And I literally thought that's the life for me then, because of my childhood. That's now kind of, that is now predicted my future, and that's it. Like, this is what happened to me. I will never be successful. I will never do this or that. I'm just like meant to live this mediocre life, you know, always on the kind of, always, have you ever felt like you're always kind of flirting with depression all the time? You're
Yes.
like
Yeah.
walking a tightrope, like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
I'm fine today, but if something goes wrong, because you know that every situation, every person has the power to trigger you.
Mm-hmm.
So I was in that loop for so many years, not knowing, like, just thinking that's it now. That's it. That's the life for me. And that's the saddest part of my story. I wouldn't change any second of anything of my upbringing. Absolutely not. But to think that there are women out there that also don't know why they feel that the way that they feel, why they feel like they're empty from inside, like they're a shell in this kind of life, not knowing what they like, just knowing that they need to please people, having that constant anxiety of, you know, having to be perfect, having to be liked because they don't like themselves, they don't love themselves. That's the thing that hurts me the most. So when I started finding answers and changing and healing my own brain, um, I was like, this is amazing. I kind of stepped out of the victim mode, But then when you start healing, you also start seeing how many other people are struggling just like you, like before. So I really wanted to help other women, really wanted to say, and if you look at my content, a lot of my content is like, hey, I understand what is happening right now. This is because of this. And it doesn't have to be that way. That's my only message.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be that way. You can find a therapist, find a coach, find whoever, but you can change that. You can change that. And there are so many different ways to heal, so many different things, but keep going. Always keep going, because you can heal from that. So that's kind of my story, a little bit in a nutshell.
I love that. And I think it's really interesting because as somebody who's experienced these things, quite often when we hear people talk about victim mode in response to having been emotionally abused as a child, because it's really difficult to get validation for emotional abuse, because it's often passed off as it's not real abuse. When we speak to professionals, they will tell you that emotional abuse is the cornerstone of abuse. We've heard it on this podcast from Helen Villiers when I spoke to Helen Villiers, who is a psychotherapist who deals with narcissism specifically. That's what her specialism is. And she works with adult children who have experienced narcissistic and toxic parents. And she will tell you that the cornerstone of all abuse starts with emotional abuse. It needs to be validated. It's really important. But we're so often told by toxic parents, oh, you just like being a victim, or oh, you're just making it up, that when we hear people talk about that victim space, it can be really confronting and triggering. But actually, what it boils down to is that self-responsibility to say, yep, this happened to me and that was shit. And it's left me with so many things that are really challenging for me and that have changed who I am as a person. And now what am I going to do with that? Because we do have the choice to say, okay, this happened to me. That needs validating and recognizing. And that was really difficult. I now have the choice to stay in that struggle, which is understandable, having been in it, because it's so hard to work through. And it feels like sometimes, in my experience in particular, as we're working through these things and we're confronting these triggers and we're acknowledging these experiences that perhaps we had our blinkers on to. For myself, I was really enmeshed with my mum. So she was my everything. I thought that, you know, she was the most wonderful person to ever grace the planet, until I started to see the really toxic and difficult behaviors, and until I started to grow into my own individuality, and that was really threatening for her. And that was when a lot of the nastiness started to come out. So for me to have to sit with things and say, oh wow, that wasn't normal, that wasn't acceptable, and now I'm going to have to work through that experience and understand it, learn about it, and move forward. It's so difficult. So I can understand why we get stuck at that victim space, and why hearing the words victim space feels very confronting, because you're told you're making it up, you're over exaggerating, it wasn't that bad, when in fact it really was, and that needs validating. But it's then what we do with it afterwards, once we've gone through the validation, once we've started to understand, once we've started to learn. And I think that's a really important part of the process that quite often we get stuck on.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. For me, it kind of boils down to the fact that I had blamed my parents for so long for, you know, everything, literally everything going on in my life. And then when I started learning about the subconscious mind and how we actually very easily sabotage ourselves because of our subconscious mind, I kind of sat myself down and I was like, but are they here now? Are they here now? Are they stopping you now? And I was like, no, it's myself. It's myself. And for me, unfortunately, things had to go really, really, really bad for me to be like, okay, what now? What now? And yeah, there's definitely, we can be a victim. There's the difference between being a victim and having that kind of victim mentality. And I hands on say I was so much stuck in victim mentality, so much, and I wear that with pride now, because I came out of the other end, and I can, you know, kind of spot it and everything like that. But I also know how to empower my clients now, because I know kind of what I was lacking when, but my clients are incredible. I'm not saying they are like stuck in victim mentality or anything like that, but just knowing kind of how disempowering all of it can feel,
Mm.
it's just all a plus point. Although I was stuck there trying to heal for 7 years straight, saying, I got my new journal now, I got a really nice pen, I'll start journaling, and
Yeah.
nothing came of it.
Yeah, it is. It's really difficult. And I mean, I love my journaling. I'm great, but there's also other things that need to be in tandem with that. It's not just about speaking to someone about your feelings or writing down your feelings. There's so much more that we need to work on and that we need to do to empower ourselves. And it is very disempowering when you've been that child that's not had that foundation.
Oh yes,
Really
yes.
disempowering. And it's really difficult because all of the foundations that are laid for us are when we are kids. So you are given this message that you're not enough, that you're not good enough. And as you say, it's that kind of floating through life, always on the cusp of not being okay and really not being okay, to being, oh, well, I'm kind of coasting. And it's
Yeah.
difficult to get out of that and to feel empowered in that way. What sort of advice do you offer to your clients to start really empowering themselves and challenging that negative self-talk, challenging that difficult space that they're in?
Yes, so like you said, it's about very much validating first.
Yeah.
And that's what I do in my practice as well. It's about validating first, because I believe that if my clients come to me and we start like first session talking about empowerment, but they have an inner child that says, no, I'm sad, I'm angry, I'm this and that, I feel that sometimes it can be a bit kind of bypassing. So I always start with actually the subconscious mind work first. It's the validation, them telling their own inner child, I see you, you are safe, and validating, I can see what you've been through, and it shouldn't have happened.
Mm.
And kind of this groundwork of really validating what they went through. Because now I always tell them as well, look, you can come to me and I can validate you all day, every day long. It won't matter. In fact, your mum and dad and whoever did you wrong could come through the door and validate you, but that wouldn't matter, because in your subconscious there's still a 6-year-old, 7-year-old, 8-year-old who felt a certain way. So although you can now have the outside validation that you think you crave, at the end of the day, that validation can now only come from you, only come from you. And that's what we do when they, that's what we do when they actually, when we do these modalities together, is for them to really, really validate themselves. Because if there's an inner child that wasn't validated, then it might be a bit hard to start talking about empowerment quite soon enough, because there will be something holding them back. That's just how I kind of do things. Obviously there's so many, it's not the right way to do or anything. That's how I prefer to do things. And we really start with kind of that validation, like you said. And then when we are talking about empowerment, I really talk about the formula of success, which was the actual turning point for me, which is the day that I stepped out of victim mode. And it happened really funnily to me. I bought this £7 NLP course on Facebook when I was like so badly. And it's really old. It's like, CD1 and CD2 old.
Yeah.
And it talked about the formula of success there. And that's when I took the kind of power back. And obviously I did, that's not how I got my qualification at the end as an NLP practitioner. but that kind of get that 7 pound course kind of gave me that little nudge. Formula of success is all about looking at your life is either you're living at cause or you're living in effect. So each and every moment you're living at cause or you're living in effect. Cause, living at cause is very empowering, and it gives you the tools and you're really resourceful. Living in effect is when you feel like everything is happening to you. Everything is happening to you, everything that's happening to you is wrong. The morning that you wake up and you've lost your keys, and then you've got a parking ticket, and all like that. And we usually look at the life that my client is like living, and we are like looking at it, and we see where they are. And that's a really, really, really empowering way to look at it. And I always tell them as well, you're not going to be 100% of the time living in empowerment. It's not feasible. I have pity parties as well, and I suggest you have them because that's life. Mm-hmm. And sometimes we just need to have a pity party and invite ourselves, and afterwards, just, the next day or day after, or maybe even a week after, get back up and go on. So I don't kind of prescribe to this like every day giving 110% masculine coaching, because I honestly think that it's not sustainable. But to look at life as a whole and see, like, it was very, very empowering for me, because that's when I was like, well, I'm the one that's been holding myself back. So looking at the life through that lens of cause and effect is one of the main things that I teach. But like I said, we do a lot of pre-work before that, because otherwise it can be a bit bypassing.
Yeah, and I think I really like what you've said there about not subscribing to the notion that we have to live life at constantly giving 110%, especially when you've had trauma and you've lived life where you have been held back and then have been taught how to hold yourself back, because that's what it is. You are essentially taught how to hold yourself back, how to be fearful, how to be conscious, how to be hypervigilant, and all of these things. So when you read these, particularly with empowerment coaching and with all of these very toxic positivity messages that we see all over social media of, you've got to be a go-getter, you've got to go and do this, you've got to go and do that, and it's, yeah, you're rolling your eyes there, because it's completely unsustainable. And if anything, I think it's incredibly damaging to tell someone that they have to be in this constant go, go, go mentality, because you burn yourself out, especially when you've come from a place of trauma and you've come from a place of difficulty. As you say, sometimes you just need to be able to curl up on the sofa and have a day where you're just feeling a bit crap. And that's okay. There's no shame in that. And when we shame ourselves, it really doubles down on that negative self-talk, on that negative inner critic. And it makes life so much more difficult for us. So having those days where we say, you know what, actually, I'm not having a great day. I'm having a really difficult day. And then the next day, reflecting on what has been our successes, on where we're at in life, despite what we've come through, despite the experiences that we've had. That's where the key is in looking at, okay, how have we moved forward and how can we keep moving forward?
Yeah, absolutely. And coaching is not about being happy all the time. Go, 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 go get a 5 a.m. club or all the rest of it. It's not that. For some coaches it might be, but sometimes my clients come to the course and they're like, well, I cried yesterday, and I'm like, honey, I cried 3 hours before. And they're like, really? And I'm like, yes. Because do you know what? You and me, we're human. And there's so much kind of, they really like it because they've almost been given a permission that they can feel all those feelings and be a human and have a pity party. But then you know what? They dust themselves off and they're good to go. But this kind of go, 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 sometimes I'm wondering if that isn't also a trauma response.
Yeah,
You know,
absolutely.
5 a.m. and giving 101% of yourself every day, especially as women. We don't function that way. We're cyclical beings. We can't do that. We can't maintain the same levels of energy throughout the month. So yeah, I'm all about kind of bringing that toxic positivity narrative down as well, and I've made a lot of content around it, because every time I see something, and what I really also don't like is very surface level advice on Instagram, things like just love yourself. Okay, thank you very much.
God, if I knew it was that easy, I'd have been doing it.
Oh, just stop, just choose yourself and stop people
Oh.
pleasing. And I'm saying, and I mean, like, there's no kind of context given, and it's usually very pretty, and it's usually very, you know, very sexy, kind of the sexy marketing, sexy everything. Just choose yourself. And you know what, people like that because our subconscious mind always goes towards the path of like less resistance.
Yeah.
So people think that this is easy, then they flock to it. And when people get on a call with me, I'm going to say, it's not going to be easy. I'm sorry, because surface level advice, although it gives you that 3-second dopamine hit, you know, that you read a quote and you're like an empowerment quote on Instagram, and you're like, yes, you know, it's usually targeted, so you know exactly in your head that it applies to someone in your family, and you're like, yes,
yeah,
yes. And you save that, and you're like, oh, I'm sorry to tell you, but for that 3 seconds, yeah, you can feel really empowered. But at the end of the day, just saving posts coming from someone who used to do that, you know, all the time, thinking, you know, getting that little dopamine hit from these little posts that were so easily digestible and very surface level, like, just stop doing it. I call it the just do it club, because it's like, just do this, just do that. And
super
it's
easy.
Like, your subconscious mind is like 95% of what's going on here. And you are giving like conscious level advice to just stop doing, because if you just stop people pleasing, that you decide, I'm going to stop people pleasing, that's conscious, that's a conscious activity. I'm going to stop people pleasing. But that people pleasing is that you are doing itself is not a conscious activity, it's a subconscious activity. So you are trying to fight 95% that is your subconscious mind with 5%. Who's going to win? What's going to happen? You know what I mean?
It's not going how you want it to go, I'm afraid.
Trust me, I tried 7 years. Tried 7 years. And I mean, when I said before about getting my journal and everything like that, nothing, I love journaling and writing stuff down, but I mean, like, you know, when you get like a new one and you're like, now things are going to change.
This is going to fix me.
Fluffy pen, and before you know it, you're binging on Netflix, and your new diary, your new journal is just gathering dust. That was me for 5 years. That was, sorry, 7 years. That was me. So I know a lot about self-sabotage, and, you know, also looking at the surface level things and thinking, oh yeah, that's what it is. But like you said, it can be harmful, because all of these people, they're like, okay, I'm going to stop people pleasing, and I'm going to start loving myself, right? I'm going to do that Friday avocado mask, I'm going to take that long bath, and nothing's going to change. And they think that there's something wrong with them because they cannot keep up with that surface level advice. Whereas actually it's like, no, it's not you, it's the advice on Instagram, and I'm not saying that, you know, all content that I put out is absolutely perfect and very, very nuanced. I try my best, but obviously we know that it's impossible to put out content that is nuanced for every person on this planet. But kind of these pretty posts that say, just stop doing it, just take time for yourself.
Just, it's that word, isn't it? If you see something that says just, it's minimizing, it's diminishing, and it's invalidating. Because if you could just, then there wouldn't be such a thing as a coach, and there wouldn't be such a thing as a therapist, because you would literally just. And it's not about literally just doing anything. And there is this industry attitude of toxic positivity. There is this industry attitude of almost selling and marketing therapy and healing. And healing is bloody hard work, and it takes time. And there is this myth as well that healing is a process, yes, but then you get to an end point and you're done. And that's not true either. We will spend our lives working through and healing new triggers, constant triggers that will come up. And I know, especially when you're in the thick of it, that sounds really daunting, because as humans, we are programmed to want that finish line. We're programmed to want that neat little package. Exactly. Tick it off. We're done. It's like a to-do list. It's like, I'm going to heal today and I'm done. And that's not reality. Healing is hard work. And it's also a continual process of our evolution as people, who we are, where we're at in that stage, where we're at that month, where we're at that day, where we're at that hour. It's a constant process. And there is this attitude that you will just get on with it, just do it. So when you are working through your trauma and you are working through new triggers, you are working through things that have come up for you, and you're trying to get to that place where you feel like you are the one in charge of your life, which you are, but you feel and believe that you're the one that's in charge of your life, and you feel empowered to move forward with your life. It's so challenging when people are telling you, just do this, because there is nothing that makes you feel like more of a failure than when you feel like, I've just done it myself. I was working through in therapy, finished therapy because I got to a point where I didn't feel I needed it anymore. My therapist didn't feel I needed these sessions anymore. And I felt like I was in a really great, strong place, and then took a bit of a dip, had a few triggers pop up for me. And there was nothing more upsetting, frustrating, and self-shaming than thinking, God, I've got to go back into it. And I thought I was done. And that's even knowing what I know, even having done the work that I've done years and years down the line, of feeling like, God, I've really failed here. I'm going to have to ring my therapist because I'm not okay right now. And I've really failed. And I hadn't failed. I just had some stuff that I needed to say, okay, what's going on for me here? How can I unpack it? Unpack it with help, unpack it with communication, unpack it with validation. And then we go again and we keep going again. But there is this feeling of failure that then leads to us self-shaming, leads to us holding ourselves back, leads to those feelings of fear when we dress up healing as something that's just going to happen or be done, because it isn't.
Absolutely. And I tell that to my clients, I tell that to my friends, like anyone I come into contact with and talk about this subject, because I'm so passionate about it. So I always want to talk about it. But I always tell them, like, you're going to be 95, you're going to be, you know, on your deathbed, you're still going to be like seeing where that trigger is coming. By that time, you probably don't care. But life is not an Excel spreadsheet. We are born into this society as well that is very linear, that is very Monday to Friday, 9 till 5, you know, tick, 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 tick. And no, like, this is not how healing goes. You are a human being. And I tell my clients as well, look, we're going to have a journey together. You know, we're going to be together for this many weeks. And you think afterwards that, you know, oh, you're better and everything like that, and of course you are, but something will happen, like you're going to get into a new relationship, or you're going to get a new job, and all of these shadows and insecurities, I don't like this saying, but it rhymes. New level, new devil, you know.
Yeah.
I don't like to use the word devil, because it's not bad, but it's also really, really beautiful, because if you think about the most meaningful relationships in your life, like the one that you have with your spouse, with your children, with your friends, all of these relationships are really deep and meaningful, because you've had to go there with them. You've had to maybe not have a fight, but you've had to kind of really see what's there. You just have that, you know, that really deep connection. And every time that a new trigger does pop up for you, a new limiting belief does pop up for you, or anything like that, that is a chance to get to know yourself deeper, more, and again, and sit down with yourself. So I think it's a beautiful thing. I'm so passionate about reframing this, because many clients have come to me going, when does this end? And I'm like, but what? But question yourself, why do you know, why are you so desperate to get to this some sort of finish line? Of course, because they think they're broken, whereas they are not actually broken. They just have these limiting beliefs and everything like that. And of course it can be exhausting, so exhausting, like going through that all the time. But there is not a finish line, but it doesn't have to be a bad thing. It can be such a beautiful thing, going, oh my god, okay, this is coming up for me, where do I think this comes from, you know, and exploring that with yourself, thinking, okay, this, oh my god, I didn't even know that this happened. I can now remember that. I think this is connected to that. And, you know, working with yourself on that past can be extremely, yes, tiring, yes, so exhausting, but also so beautiful, because that's a way to reconnect with yourself.
It is. And you can tell that it's exhausting. You can tell that it's the work, it's actual hard work, because it is exhausting. Somebody had said to me that they'd come to this realization, they'd cut ties with their parent, or they'd been through this really traumatic event, and all they wanted to do was sleep. All they wanted to do was rest. And you hear that time and time again when someone's been through a traumatic event and then has started to come out of the other side of that anxiety, that stress, and they're just really tired. And it's your body recouping itself. It's your body clawing back what it needed during that period of deep stress, of deep anxiety. And when we've grown up in that period, working through that, because it's been a hugely sustained period of anxiety, stress, trauma, fight and flight response, you're now moving into a period where you are healing, and the body and the mind both heal, both do the work, and are knackered. You know, it's tiring and it's difficult, but it is an opportunity to meet yourself on a deeper level and get to know yourself better, which, when you've grown up in that difficult and toxic family, especially if you've grown up around a lot of invalidation, you're almost taught there's something selfish in taking that time to get to know you. Because especially for myself and other people who've experienced that enmeshment with a parent, the sense of you is completely eradicated. You don't have a you have a what you're told you should be. So to sit with yourself and meet yourself is really challenging. But you now have the opportunity outside of that relationship that you had with your parent, or once you come to realize that your relationship with your parent was toxic, once you come to see the flaws there, to say, that's not going to happen anymore. Who am I? What do I want? How can I meet myself? How can I get to know who I actually am? And it's quite scary to get to know who you are, and it requires that shadow work. It requires that deep delve into who you are, what you believe, and it's difficult.
it's very, very difficult, but it's so rewarding
Yeah.
once you, because I don't have a lot of kind of experience in regards to what you, I'm not sure kind of so much about your background, but as I can imagine, it was a narcissistic parent.
Yeah.
um it's that when you I think this toxic I think these toxic families can leave us very, very empty inside. So every time
Yeah.
you do that shadow work, you do that inner child work, a little bit of something starts kind of filling up here, a little bit of like your identity, about who you are, about what you think about yourself. Because a lot of the time we don't even know, what do we think about
Yeah.
ourselves. And that's why a lot of my content also is kind of trying to bridge that gap about, hey, this is what you're feeling, but this is why you're feeling it.
Yeah.
Because we don't know a lot of the times where it comes from. And I've had really beautiful messages from people that, hey, like your content finally made me realize that I had to go to therapy. And I've been like with my therapist for like 3 weeks now. Thank you very much. And these just filled my heart so much, because a lot of the times we just don't know what that is, that kind of this emptiness inside, right? So, but yeah, like you said, every time we do like this shadow work, it is challenging, but once that cup starts filling, that
Yeah.
empowerment there is like, you haven't felt that before, and it's so liberating. And yes, you have days where you still feel a bit down, like we talked about it before. It's, up and down, up and down. But once you get to that place of knowing how to deal with yourself and taking a step back, knowing how to ask help, and knowing that you're not a failure
Mm.
when these little dips do come, it's quite an incredible place to be, isn't it?
It is, it is. And I think as well, for anyone who is listening and hears us talk about that inner child work and hears us talk about shadow work, even now, sometimes I'll still be a bit like, ooh, still like, ooh, because you still think about it. Now, I still think there is that piece of me that I have to sit with and be like, okay, why do you feel that way? But that still cringes a bit when we talk about it. And I hear it and I think, oh, I don't want to talk to my 6-year-old self. Like, please don't make me. And I have to say to myself, this is this is the real work. This is the realizing where that trauma sits, validating it, looking at yourself introspectively. So initially, it can be really difficult to do because you're sat there thinking, oh my God, this is so like kooky. This is so weird. I'm going to do shadow work. I'm going to do that. Oh God, what am I even talking about? Who am I? This is ridiculous. But once you start to do it, it gets easier and easier to do, easier and easier to sit with yourself and to say, okay, yeah, this is why I feel that way. Okay, yeah, this is how I'm going to manage this. It does get easier to meet yourself on that compassionate level once you start the work, but the starting it can be so difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. It can be very weird. It can be very like, what am I doing? But
Yeah.
it's almost like a muscle that
Mm.
the more you do it, the more easier it is. And you don't always, to talk to your inner child, you don't always have to, put music on anymore and close your eyes. You can just have that conversation, even when you're doing things like washing dishes, because kind of that you've been down that lane so much. So yeah, definitely. But whoever is listening and thinking, oh my God, when does the work stop? I would just really encourage to reframe that, and to think that this is a beautiful thing. This is a beautiful experience that we are having here. Although sometimes I know what it feels, and I know that you feel it too, Harriet, too, that sometimes it feels like it's not a beautiful
Oh
experience.
yeah.
But we are here on this, like this big rock, having a human experience, and the work never stops, but it is beautiful at the same time.
It is. And there is real power in realizing that, and in saying, actually, you know what, it's okay that it doesn't feel that way at the time. But once you come through it, there is real power in that for yourself, because that's what it boils down to. It's about finding that power in you and for you, and recognizing it and being able to use it to move forward with your life.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me about all things empowerment and moving forward through these experiences. Can you let my listeners know where they can find you, please?
Yes, absolutely. So active. I'm active mainly on Instagram, and they can find me on my Instagram handle is triinu.co. That's TRIINU.co. And that's also my website, so they can find me there as well. But do connect with me. Let me know that you have listened to this episode. Hopefully you found it really helpful as well.
Yeah, I hope so. And I hope there is plenty of opportunity for people to go and check out the kind of content that you create and see what you're about and what you do, because I do find it incredibly empowering without being that toxic positivity and without being that, let's just do this, because that's just not the reality of it. And it's not what any of us need when we've been through trauma, to find that it is minimized as a let's just. Guys, I will speak to you next week. Bye.